Hi, my name's Rhiannon. A few months ago, I got a call no daughter should ever hear, my parents whispering through the phone at midnight, saying they were starving that my brother had locked them in the basement. At first, I thought it was confusion, maybe dementia. But it wasn't. It was a plan, cold, deliberate, and years in the making. I thought family meant love, loyalty, safety. But what if the people who raised you became your captors? What if the person you trusted most turned your home into a cage? I didn't know it that night, but that call was just the beginning. It started with a sound I'd almost forgotten, my phone buzzing on the nightstand, breaking through the silence of my apartment. I remember glancing at the clock. 12:11 a.m. I almost ignored it. But then I saw the caller ID, Mom and Dad. I answered, expecting to hear my mother's usual sleepy confusion or my father's half-joking complaint about the thermostat. Instead, there was panic, raw, trembling panic. Rhiannon? Honey, please, we're so hungry. He locked us down here. I sat upright, the sheets falling away. Mom? What are you talking about? Locked where? Her breath came in gasps. Behind her voice, I heard my father calling weakly. Your brother Jareth, please, hurry, then the line cut out. For a moment, I couldn't move. My mind refused to process what I'd heard. It was like my brain was searching for some reasonable explanation, some mistake, some misunderstanding. But my hands had already begun to shake. I stared at the phone, hoping they'd call back. They didn't. I pressed redial. No answer. The dread that followed felt almost familiar. Like a ghost I'd kept buried for years had decided to visit again. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I'd last gone home to Flagstaff. 6 months since Jareth and I had argued about the care of our parents, about the bills, the medicine, the legal guardianship he insisted he should handle because he lived closer. I had told myself they were fine. That calling once a week was enough. But now, as I sat in the dim light of my apartment, guilt rolled through me like a tide. Could my mother's dementia have worsened? Could she really be imagining things? Or had I ignored something that had been building all along? I didn't bother to change clothes. I grabbed my keys, my jacket, and a half-charged phone and headed for the car. The streets were nearly empty, the world asleep. My headlights cut through the darkness as I got onto the highway. The drive from Phoenix to Flagstaff takes 2 hours if you're calm. I wasn't. Every mile felt longer than the last. As I drove, my mind played a cruel slideshow, childhood memories, fights, moments when I should have seen Jareth's true colors. The way he'd mocked me for escaping to college while he stayed behind to take care of things. The way he'd made our parents feel guilty for aging. He had always been good at control. Quiet, polite, charming in public, but underneath it all, there was something cold. The desert rolled past my window, black and endless. I turned off the radio, trying to quiet my thoughts, but silence only made them louder. By the time I reached the foothills, my fingers were cramped from gripping the wheel so tightly. When the first outline of the family house appeared under the faint glow of the moon, my stomach twisted. It looked the same as ever, ranch style, low roof, dark shutters, but something about it felt wrong. The porch light was off. No movement. No sound. I parked by the mailbox and sat for a moment, watching the stillness. Then I dialed again. Nothing. Okay, I whispered to myself, forcing air into my lungs. You're overreacting. They're asleep. Maybe she dreamt it. Still, I walked up the gravel path, my shoes crunching softly. The night air was cold, sharp enough to sting. I knocked once, twice. Nothing. Then I banged harder. Finally, footsteps. The door opened, and there he was. Jareth. He looked exactly the same, calm, composed, wearing that tired half-smile he used whenever he wanted to make me feel small. His hair was neatly combed. He held a mug of coffee, as if it were any normal night. He said, sounding almost amused. What are you doing here? I blinked at him, trying to read his face. I got a call from Mom. She said you locked them in the basement. He frowned, slow and deliberate, as if I'd said something absurd. Locked them? Jesus, Rhiannon. Do you even hear yourself? They've been asleep for hours. I stepped forward, but he stayed in the doorway. Then where's Dad? In bed. Same place he's been. He had soup around 10 and went to sleep. His tone hardened. Mom's dementia's been worse lately. She's been calling random numbers, making up stories. It's heartbreaking, really. Stories, I repeated, my voice rising. She sounded terrified. She said you. He sighed, holding up a hand like a patient teacher. You always do this. You make everything dramatic. You come charging in from Phoenix, thinking you know better because you read a few medical articles online. I clenched my fists. Let me see them. They're sleeping, he said, still smiling, but the edges of his words sharpened. You'll just confuse them. It's late. I took a step closer. Move! His body stiffened. You're not going down there. Something about the way he said it, flat, final, sent a chill through me. Down where? I asked. He blinked slowly, then gave a small laugh. You see what I mean? You're already spinning stories. He leaned against the doorframe. Why don't you go get a motel, sleep it off, and come back in the morning? You'll feel stupid once you see everything's fine. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to shove past him, but I didn't. Not yet. He was watching me too closely. Instead, I stepped back, forcing a calm smile. You're right. It's late. He seemed relieved, even smug. Good. Get some rest. I'll call you in the morning. I turned, walking down the steps, but I didn't go to the car. Not right away. Something about the house, the stillness, the way every light was off, made me stop. I noticed a faint metallic glint by the side door. When I looked closer, I saw it, a new deadbolt, one that hadn't been there before. And above it, a small black security camera. We'd never had cameras. I swallowed hard. Maybe he'd installed them for safety, but why just the basement door? Why not the front? I circled to the back of the house, where the gravel path faded into grass. The air smelled of pine and damp soil. I kept my phone light low as I approached the small basement window near the ground. It was dark inside, but then I thought I saw movement. I crouched, listening. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, soft, rhythmic tapping. Hello, I whispered. The sound stopped. Then came a faint, trembling voice. Ree, is that you? My breath caught. It was my mother. I froze, heart hammering, afraid to speak, afraid of what I might hear next. The house above me creaked. Jareth was still awake. I didn't dare breathe. Her voice, thin, ragged, but unmistakably hers, cut through the silence like a blade. I crouched lower by the edge of the old garden bed, brushing away damp leaves and ivy vines. There it was, a narrow vent near the foundation of the house, partially rusted over with wire mesh. I leaned closer, my lips trembling as I whispered, Mom, where are you? A pause, then uneven gasps. Down here, please, he doesn't feed us. My body froze. My ears rang with the thundering of my heartbeat. For a moment, the night didn't feel real. The air grew colder, heavier. My mind rejected what I'd heard, but my heart had already accepted it. I scanned the yard quickly. The kitchen window still glowed, faintly, blinds closed but not tightly. I caught the silhouette of Jareth, moving about inside. He was still awake. I backed away slowly, careful not to snap any twigs or disturb the gravel. I knew this house. Every board, every nail. I'd helped paint the porch railing with my mom one summer, barefoot and 10 years old. Now I felt like a trespasser in a place that once held every childhood memory. My destination was the old garden shed, abandoned, cluttered, and forgotten behind the garage. It reeked of mildew and stale oil. My flashlight beam caught the dusty metal toolbox Dad used to keep near the grill. I knelt beside it and opened the lid with shaking hands. Beneath old fishing line and corroded screws, I found it. The brass key, slick with dust, tarnished from years of disuse, but still warm from my grip. My fingers closed around it like a lifeline. I didn't allow myself to hope. Not yet. I waited for the house to fall quiet. The kitchen light dimmed. A murmur of television drifted through the walls upstairs. Then silence. I checked my watch. 1:43 a.m. Slipping around the side of the house, I reached the basement door. It had changed. There was a newer, heavier latch beneath the old deadbolt, fresh scratches in the paint, a thick padlock drilled straight into the frame. Reinforced, hidden, deliberate. I slid the brass key in. It jammed. I tried again, pressing harder. The metal wouldn't turn. Frustrated, I gritted my teeth and threw my shoulder into the door. Once. Nothing. Twice. A sharp crack. The third time, the frame split slightly, and the bolt gave way with a sharp, metallic snap. The door creaked open, loud and haunting in the still night air. What hit me next wasn't fear. It was the smell. Rot. Sweat. Mold. Sour milk. The air inside felt wrong, heavy, like it hadn't moved in weeks. I raised my phone, its light flickering, and stepped into the dark. The basement was no longer a place of memories. It had been turned into a cage. Old Christmas bins, broken lamps, and plastic storage crates were shoved against the walls. A mattress, thin, sagging, and dirty, lay near the center, surrounded by crumpled blankets and a pile of newspapers taped over the small windows. And on that mattress my parents, my mother and father huddled together beneath a gray blanket that looked like it belonged in a junkyard. My mom's once blonde hair was now tangled and dull, matted around her face. My father's skin was ashen, his cheeks sunken. Their eyes didn't focus at first. "Mom!" My voice cracked. "Dad!" They flinched. My mother turned toward me slowly, eyes wide. Tears pooled instantly. "Oh, baby, I thought you forgot us." I dropped to my knees, touching her cold arm. "No, I didn't forget. What's happening here?" She coughed, dry and painful. "He said it's safer down here," said we wander get confused. "He says the stairs are broken," my father rasped. I looked around. The cooler in the corner was empty, except for the foul stench of spoiled dairy. A jug of water, half full. A plate of stale bread, untouched. This wasn't care. This was confinement. I pulled out my phone and started recording, silently capturing the room, the filth, their faces. My mother's hand found mine and squeezed weakly. "Don't let him hear you," she whispered. "He gets angry when we talk too much." "I'm taking you upstairs," I whispered. "This ends now." But before I could move, a voice thundered from the staircase. "What the hell are you doing down here?" Jared's frame filled the stairwell, his shadow long and furious. His face was red, his jaw clenched, but his tone turned mocking, almost calm. "You ever think before you act, Rhiannon? You're trespassing." I stood, placing myself between him and our parents. "They called me. From the vent. They said you locked them in." He scoffed. "Locked them in? You sound insane. They have dementia. They wander. The basement is climate-controlled. Safe." I pointed to the rotting mattress. "Safe. They're starving." He sighed dramatically. "You don't get it. You haven't been here. I'm the one who feeds them, cleans them, watches them. You show up from your condo in Phoenix and think you're the savior." My father tried to speak. "Son, don't, Dad," Jared snapped. "She's always been like this. Drama queen. Remember the time she thought Mom was cursed because she lost her car keys?" "That was a seizure," I snapped back. "And you knew it." He stepped closer. "You moved away because you couldn't handle reality. Now you come back and question everything I've done? You don't get to do that." I stared him down. "I'm taking them out of here." "No, you're not," he growled. "You're leaving. Before you get yourself arrested." I didn't move. "Fine," I said softly. I turned, walked up the stairs, and shut the door behind me. Outside, I collapsed into the driver's seat of my car, hands shaking. I opened the recording, watched the entire exchange, every word, every insult, every silent cry from my parents' eyes. Then, I uploaded the file to my encrypted cloud drive and titled it, "In Case Something Happens to Me." I didn't leave. I sat there all night in the driveway, engine off, watching the house. Jareth paced the living room like a man possessed. I could tell he knew I wasn't gone for good. And he was right. At sunrise, I whispered to myself, "You won't get away with this." Then I drove away, but not to forget. I drove to fight. The first blush of dawn had just touched the sky when I pulled into Clara's driveway. A pale orange hue stretched lazily over the quiet street, brushing against the rooftops and dew-slick lawns. My fingers gripped the steering wheel a moment longer than necessary. I hadn't slept. Not really. My mind was still racing from the night before, each memory looping louder, more vivid. I parked with the kind of caution that becomes habit in a house where silence had once meant survival. Never too close. Never draw attention. I walked up to her door with my pulse thudding in my ears, my shoes crunching lightly on gravel. The air smelled like wet bark and fading roses. When the door opened, Clara stood there in her housecoat, hair pulled back loosely, eyes shadowed by exhaustion. But the moment she saw me, something sharper ignited in her gaze, concern, maybe even fear. "Rhiannon," she murmured. "Come in, dear. You look awful." "I need to talk," I said, my voice hoarse. She opened the door wider. "Of course." Inside, the kitchen was dimly lit, curtains still drawn, a faint smell of burnt toast clinging to the air. The coffee pot burbled quietly in the corner. I slid into a worn wooden chair, its legs creaking beneath me. Clara sat across the table, cupping a chipped mug between her trembling hands. "I saw you leave last night," she began gently. "I couldn't sleep. I looked out and saw your car." She paused, eyes darting to the clock. "Something's been wrong for a long time now. I didn't want to get involved, but I heard them. Your brother yelling at your mother. He was pushing her to sign something, some document she didn't understand. She was crying afterward. Her voice cracked as she said it. I looked down, gripping the edge of the table. So it wasn't just my memory. Someone else had seen it too. She used to get up in the middle of the night," Clara continued. "She'd say she lost her keys or couldn't sleep, but sometimes she'd mutter about the bank something they needed her to sign. She didn't seem to understand it. I think she was scared. I remember that, too. Mom standing in the kitchen, clutching her robe, staring at nothing. Once, she whispered to me that she regretted signing something but wouldn't say more. I thought it was confusion. I told myself she was just tired. I kept this just in case," Clara said, standing up slowly and disappearing into the hallway. When she returned, she held a small envelope, creased, aged, and slightly yellowed. "She gave me these letters. I don't know why. Maybe she needed someone to know. Maybe she just needed someone to hold them." With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside were 3 pages in my mother's handwriting, slanted, soft, and unmistakably hers. One line stood out in the middle of the first page. "They say it's routine, but nothing about this feels right. I miss the days when I could say no." I swallowed hard. My mother had tried to speak, but no one listened. "I'm going back," I said suddenly, the words heavy in the stillness. "Tonight." Clara's eyes widened. "Rhiannon, be careful. Don't stay too long. Don't let him see you." That evening, just as the sun dropped behind the hills, I waited in my car near the grocery store. When I spotted Jareth exiting with bags in hand, I knew I had maybe 20 minutes. I drove the long way back, parked around the block, and crept into the house through the back entrance. Every step was deliberate. The old wooden floors groaned beneath my weight, as if warning me. Upstairs remained still, no signs of Merrick, no echo of footsteps. I moved quickly, retracing my path toward the basement. The air grew colder with each step down. The smell of mildew thickened, a wet, heavy scent that clung to my throat. The flashlight beam bounced across furniture draped in sheets, boxes stacked like forgotten monuments. Then I saw it, a wooden chest I'd passed 100 times, but never really noticed. This time, I noticed everything. I knelt in front of it, pulling the tools from my pocket, thin metal picks and wires I'd learned to use in college, not for mischief, but for curiosity. The lock gave with a soft pop. The lid creaked open. Inside, among velvet-lined compartments and dusty jewelry, was an envelope sealed in wax. Beneath it, tucked even deeper, was a folded sheet of paper, thick, expensive stock. My fingers tingled as I pulled it free. It was a will, dated 18 months ago. My name was there, clearly, deliberately, next to Jareth's and Merrick's. But it wasn't the version Jareth had filed. I knew because I'd seen that one, bold, cold, and typed to impersonate legality. This signature, though this one looked like my mother's. Gentle loops, a soft curve at the R, a hesitation at the end, as if her hand had trembled. My heart pounded as I took out my phone. I snapped photos, scanned the pages, encrypted the files, and sent them off to Leah, my lawyer friend in Phoenix. She always said to send everything in threes. App scan, high-res photo and backup link. I followed it like gospel. For a long moment, I just sat there, listening to the thick silence of the basement. I pressed my ear to the concrete wall. Nothing but damp and memory. They buried the truth down here, I whispered, while he lived upstairs in all that light. Then my phone vibrated. Ping. It was Leah. Just one message. We need to talk. That signature might not be your mother's. The room tilted. I stared at the screen, pulse racing. Not her signature, or not only hers. My hands moved automatically, slipping everything back into place. I climbed the stairs with care, but as I reached the living room, I stopped. Through the sheer curtains, I saw Jareth. Outside. Pacing again. Talking on his phone, hands slicing the air as he gestured. Watching. Always watching. I moved quietly, stepping backward, 1 foot at a time, until I reached the back door. I slipped outside, careful not to let it creak. The air hit my face like a warning. The sky had gone completely dark. In my pocket, the phone vibrated again. But I didn't check it. Not yet. I walked fast, never running, never giving the house a reason to notice me. Because now, I wasn't just uncovering secrets. I was threatening the throne built on them. The air outside still carried the damp chill of early morning when I saw movement by the edge of the driveway. Merrick. He was pacing near the mailbox, his phone pressed tight to his ear, his voice low but tense. I ducked behind the shrubs, crouching low enough that I could just make out fragments of his words carried by the breeze. Yeah, she found something, he whispered harshly. The will I told you this would happen. You should have handled it months ago. The blood drained from my face. His back was to me, his shoulders hunched. Whoever he was talking to, it could only be Jareth. My pulse hammered, so hard it drowned out the early morning birds. When he hung up, I stepped out from behind the mailbox. You want to tell me what that was about? Merrick jumped, nearly dropping his phone. Rhiannon, what the hell? You scared me. I heard everything. My voice shook, not from fear but fury. You said the will. You knew about it. He stammered, eyes darting. I know, listen, it's not what you think. Then explain it. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking everywhere but at me. Jareth said you'd blow things out of proportion. He told me to keep my distance. He said there were legal issues, that you'd make a mess if you got involved. I folded my arms. Legal issues? You mean him cutting me out of Mom and Dad's estate? He sighed, shoulders sagging. He promised me part of it if I stayed out of the picture. Said it was better for everyone. Less fighting, fewer lawyers. So you took the bribe, I said quietly. He winced, guilt flashing across his face. I didn't know he'd actually hurt them, Rhi. I swear. I thought he was exaggerating. I thought maybe Mom really was losing her mind. The words hit me like stones. You thought? You've seen them, Merrick. You've seen what he's done. You looked away. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, shame settling over him. I didn't know what to do. You could have called me, I said coldly. You could have told me. He looked down, defeated. I'm sorry. Silence stretched between us. The wind picked up, rustling the trees. I finally exhaled. We're done hiding this. I'm calling a family meeting tonight. Everyone's going to be there, you, me, Jareth, Mom, Dad, and Clara as a witness. Merrick's eyes widened. Clara! She hates him. Exactly, I said. Maybe it's time someone finally told the truth. He hesitated, voice barely a whisper. I'll come, but I'm only saying what I know if he starts lying first. He will, I said. He always does. By evening, the house felt like a pressure cooker. The old dining room table that had once hosted birthday cakes and Thanksgiving dinners now sat beneath a dim light bulb, surrounded by silence. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Jareth stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Merrick sat across from him, eyes on the floor. Clara took a seat by the window, notebook in hand. Mom and Dad sat side by side, frail but alert. I stood at the opposite end of the table, the folded document in front of me. Jareth gave a low chuckle. So what's this? Another intervention. Sit down, I said. He did, though not before giving Merrick a pointed look that made my brother shrink in his chair. Mom's hands trembled on her lap. "We're ready to speak," she whispered. Jareth smiled at her, the same rehearsed smile that had fooled so many people. "Of course you are, Mom. But please don't tire yourself. You've been under a lot of stress lately." I slammed the document onto the table. "Stop pretending. We all know what you've done." He frowned slightly, as if humoring a child. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Then explain this." I unfolded the will. 18 months ago, Mom and Dad signed this. They're real signatures, not the ones you forged. You replaced it with another version that cut me out entirely. He leaned forward, inspecting the papers. "Forgery? That's a serious accusation, Rhiannon. You might want to think before you say something you can't take back." Clara's voice cut through the tension. "I was there that day. I saw Lorraine crying. You forced her to sign something she didn't want to." Jareth turned on her, eyes narrowing. "You've always hated me. You should stay out of things that don't concern you." "They concern me when I hear a woman sobbing through my fence," Clara snapped. Merrick looked from one to the other, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Jareth, just stop. She's telling the truth." Jareth laughed again, but it was hollow this time. "Oh, please. You're siding with her now? The one who ran off and only shows up when there's money involved." "That's not fair," I shot back. "This isn't about money. This is about them." I gestured toward our parents. Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Son, tell the truth." Something cracked in Jareth's expression, just for a moment. Then he sneered. "The truth? Fine. I did what needed to be done. You were both losing your minds. You would have signed the house away to scammers. I protected what's ours." "Yours," I corrected softly. "You protected what's yours." Merrick suddenly slammed his hand against the table. "You lied to all of us." His voice trembled but grew stronger. "You told me you were taking care of them. That the will was just paperwork. I heard you on the phone with Harlan, planning how to cut her out, your own sister." Jareth froze. The color drained from his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I heard." Merrick shot back. "You said, she won't see a dime." Mom gasped softly, pressing her hand to her chest. Jareth stood, his calm facade fracturing. "You're all turning on me now? After everything I've done?" I stood too. "You mean everything you've taken?" The air vibrated with rage and fear. Clara's pen hovered over her notebook, ready to record every word. Then Mom's breathing hitched. Her eyes rolled back, and she slumped forward in her chair. "Mom!" I screamed, catching her before she fell. "Somebody call 911. Dad fumbled for his phone, shaking so badly he could barely press the buttons. Jareth stood motionless, face pale, lips parted, as if the world had finally spun beyond his control. I looked up at him, fury and terror blending into one sharp clarity. "This is on you." He said nothing. The paramedics arrived minutes later, their radios crackling, their calm efficiency cutting through the chaos. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, I followed close, gripping her cold hand. Everything we had built, every illusion of family, every thread of loyalty was unraveling. But even as the sirens carried her away, one thought stayed with me. I wasn't done. The sterile glow of the hospital lights pressed into my eyes. I'd been sitting there for hours, the hum of machines and the muted beeps from down the hall forming a dull rhythm that filled the silence. Mom was stable now, her breathing shallow but even. The faint trace of pink had returned to her cheeks, but she looked fragile, almost translucent. I held her hand and traced the veins on her wrist, as if by touching her I could somehow keep her anchored to me. Dad sat beside her bed, his eyes fixed on the floor. His voice, when it came, was small. "He's still our son, Rhiannon." I turned to him, stunned. "After everything he's done? After what you just saw?" Dad didn't look up. "He's lost, that's all. Your mother and I, maybe we failed him somehow." It felt like someone had reached inside my chest and twisted. "No," I said quietly. "You didn't fail him. He made his choices." Before I could say more, the door swung open. Jareth stepped in, clean-shaven, his shirt crisp, a polished lawyer trailing behind him like a shadow. His tone was smooth, almost gentle. "Good evening. I'm glad Mom's okay." I rose to my feet. "What are you doing here?" He didn't answer. Instead, He turned to the lawyer, who opened a folder and pulled out a document, holding it as if it were sacred text. "This," Jareth said calmly, "is the updated will. Signed, notarized, and legally binding. As of 3 months ago, I am sole caretaker and executor of our parents' estate." My mouth went dry. "You forged another one?" The lawyer's voice cut in before Jareth could answer. "Ms. Rhodes, this version supersedes any prior documents. It's been reviewed and filed properly with the state registrar." I could feel my pulse in my temples. "That's impossible. I saw the real one. Mom signed it herself, without you there." Jareth smirked. "You saw what you wanted to see." He pulled a stack of printed copies from his folder and handed them to the nurses at the station outside. "Just in case she tries to claim power of attorney, everything's been handled legally." The humiliation hit me like a slap. Nurses stared. One of them whispered to another. I could almost hear the story spreading down the hall like wildfire, the crazy daughter who caused a scene over money. Jareth looked at me with that cool, practiced expression he'd mastered over the years. "You should go home, Rhiannon. This isn't helping Mom." I clenched my fists. "You're disgusting." He smiled faintly. "I'm thorough." For a moment, everything around me blurred, the antiseptic air, the flickering lights, the faint rustle of paperwork. I remembered being 10 years old, standing in the school gym with my science fair ribbon in my hand, only to hear my mother proudly tell everyone how Jareth had built the project. I remembered how I had laughed it off back then, thinking it didn't matter. But it did. It always had. I heard my own voice before I realized I was speaking. "Why do you hate me so much?" Jareth's face twitched, just slightly, but it was enough. He took a slow breath, the mask slipping. "Because it was always you." The words landed heavy, full of venom. "It was always you," he said again, louder now. "The golden child. The perfect one. You leave, you get married, you fail, you come back, and suddenly they're proud of you again. Meanwhile, I'm the one paying their bills, fixing the roof, cleaning up after Dad's falls, and you still get the tears, the sympathy, the love." I stared at him, too stunned to speak. He stepped closer, his voice low, shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what it's like to be invisible in your own house? To watch them light up every time you walk through the door? You were gone for years, Rhiannon. I was the one who stayed. I did everything, and still, it was never enough." Mom stirred faintly in her bed, whispering, "Jareth, please stop." But he didn't. His voice grew louder, more erratic. "You think I wanted to lock them down there? I didn't. But someone had to take control. Someone had to protect them, from you, from themselves, from everyone. Protect them." I snapped. "You starved them, Jareth. You treated them like prisoners." He pointed at me, trembling with fury. "They would have lost everything. I did what needed to be done. You don't get it. You've never had to be the one holding everything together while the rest of you fell apart." For a moment, no one spoke. The nurse at the door froze, torn between duty and disbelief. Dad sat silently, tears welling in his eyes. I slipped my hand into my coat pocket and felt for my phone, already recording. His words, his confession, were spilling out in real time. I kept my voice steady. "You're not going to win this. Not this time." Jareth exhaled, a bitter smile curling his lips. "You think you can fight me? You don't even understand how deep this goes. Everything is in my name. The accounts, the deeds, everything. You're already erased, Rhiannon." He turned on his heel and walked out, his lawyer trailing behind him. The echo of his footsteps lingered long after he was gone. I sank back into the chair, my whole body trembling. The nurse approached quietly, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You okay, sweetheart?" I nodded numbly. "I will be." When she left, I looked at Mom again. She was still asleep, her face peaceful now. I leaned close and whispered, "I'm going to fix this. I promise." Then I stepped into the hallway and opened my phone. The recording had captured every word. I attached it to an email and typed a quick message to my lawyer friend in Phoenix. He confessed. "Sending now." Before I could even put my phone away, a new message popped up. A reply from him. That new will, very likely forged. I stared at the screen, a shiver running through me. The tide was shifting. For the first time in months, I didn't feel powerless. The morning sun barely pierced through my blinds, casting pale slivers of light across the kitchen table. But even that soft glow couldn't warm the chill I felt as I stared at the two things that had unraveled everything, the forged will and my phone screen. The message had come before dawn. From my lawyer, blunt and heavy. That new will, very likely forged. Enough for criminal investigation. I sat frozen for minutes. The only sound in the room was the looped playback of Jarrett's outburst. I did what had to be done, he had snarled on the recording I secretly captured. I'd listened to it so many times the words had lost their shape, until they weren't words anymore, just cold, calculated confirmation. By 6 a.m., my lawyer called to confirm. We had a path forward. Power of attorney, emergency injunctions, freezing assets, subpoenas to uncover any financial abuse. All the legal threads, finally weaving into a net strong enough to catch Jareth. I filled out form after form, hands steady but spirit cracking. Each signature felt like a quiet act of rebellion. A whisper to myself, you're not powerless anymore. Later that afternoon, I walked the long corridor of the hospital. The air smelled like antiseptic and resignation. And then I saw him, Jareth, dressed immaculately, as if this were just another business meeting. He looked at me with that same smug smile. You've made a mistake, he said softly, almost too kindly. I handed him the envelope, legal documents, notices, evidence. No, I said, meeting his eyes, holding them. You did. For the first time, his eyes flickered, and then he turned his back and walked away. No threats, no shouting, just silence. That was worse. But the silence didn't last. By evening, another blow struck. A nurse from the hospital called, hesitant. Your mother's been moved, she said, voice low, to a private elder facility, high-tech health center. What? Who authorized that? I asked, panic rising in my throat. Your brother did. He filed for emergency conservatorship. She's now under his legal guardianship. Visits will be limited. My knees buckled. This wasn't just about money anymore. He had taken her, her voice, her ability to speak for herself. He'd effectively silenced her, ensuring she'd never testify in court, never contradict his lies. I drove in a blur to the center. It was cold, sterile, pristine, just like him. The staff barely looked at me. One receptionist offered a short, rehearsed smile. We're sorry. You're not on the approved visitation list. Approved. Like I needed his permission to see my own mother. I tried calling Dad. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. When he finally picked up, his voice was weary, almost broken. Jareth said it was best, he muttered. For who? I whispered. For you. For him. He didn't answer. I signed under pressure, he finally said. He said she was confused, that it was for her protection. I closed my eyes, swallowed the scream building in my throat. Betrayal had a new name, compliance. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't, so instead I acted. By morning, my living room had become a war room. I reached out to local journalists, community advocates, and a few trusted neighbors. I set up cameras, microphones. Evidence lined the table, screenshots, the forged will, voice recordings. When the cameras turned on, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I stood still, shoulders square, and said, This isn't about family drama. This is elder abuse. This is manipulation. My mother's voice has been stolen, and I'm here to help give it back. I played the audio of Jareth's rant. I showed the video of Mom, frail, frightened, begging for help. I presented documents that contradicted the new will. Then, I let the silence settle. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of a recording phone and the occasional clicking of a camera shutter. That silence was louder than anything I could have said. By the afternoon, the storm had started. Social media picked up the story. The hashtag Justice for Lorraine spread like wildfire in our county. Messages poured in, some from strangers, others from people who had once worked for Jareth. They offered screenshots, signed statements, whispered truths. They had been afraid before, but now they saw someone standing. I wasn't just speaking for my mom anymore. I was speaking for everyone he'd intimidated into silence. And that terrified him. That night, When I returned home, I saw it. The red spray paint on my apartment door, dripping and angry. Traitor! My stomach dropped. The air felt sharp. I touched the paint, wet and fresh. This was his message. A warning. A reminder. I still have power. But I didn't flinch. Not this time. I stepped inside, locked the door, and sat by the window. Let him try. Because silence was no longer an option. I stood in front of my apartment door for a long time, staring at the words smeared across it. Traitor! The red paint dripped down the metal, bright as fresh blood. I took out my phone, snapped a picture, and uploaded it to the drive where I'd been storing every scrap of evidence. Then I wiped my hands on my jeans, dialed the local news line, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "You'll want to see what happens next." By morning, I was done hiding. I sat at my kitchen counter, coffee cooling beside my laptop, as I uploaded everything: the basement footage, Jareth's confession, the hospital argument, and the medical reports showing my parents' malnutrition. Each file had a name, a date, a timestamp. I even included the lawyer's reply confirming the forgery. Then, with one deep breath, I hit upload. The files went to the local sheriff, Adult Protective Services, 3 legal watchdog groups, and every major news outlet within 100 miles. I wasn't just exposing my brother, I was burning every bridge he'd ever built. When the videos hit the internet, they spread like wildfire. The morning news picked them up before I'd even changed out of my pajamas. By noon, the headlines scrolled across regional broadcasts. Daughter exposes alleged elder abuse. Son faces investigation. Within hours, my phone buzzed nonstop. Reporters, lawyers, strangers. Some sent messages of support. Others shared stories of their own family betrayals. I scrolled through comment sections, reading strangers' outrage directed at Jareth. This guy should rot in prison. Locking his parents in a basement? Unbelievable. Justice for Lorraine. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt tired. That afternoon, my inbox pinged with a new message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. Subject: We need to talk. Harlan. Harlan had been our family's estate lawyer for over 2 decades. He was the one who'd filed every document Jareth ever waved in my face. My hands shook as I typed back, "I'll meet you at the cafe on 6 noon. He showed up looking thinner than I remembered, his face drawn, his tie crooked. He sat across from me, eyes darting toward the window. "You shouldn't have gone public," he whispered. "Too late," I said. "You helped him, didn't you?" He rubbed his temples. He asked me to notarize the will. Said the parents had already signed it, but I never saw them do it. He wanted me to backdate it. Said it was just to streamline paperwork. I leaned in. "You knew it was fake." "I suspected," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. But he threatened to ruin my career if I didn't comply. He had clients who owed him favors, people on the state board. I was trapped. "Then why are you here now?" I asked. He met my eyes. "Because this has gone too far. I can't sleep at night knowing what I helped him do." I slid my phone onto the table, the camera quietly recording. "Say that again." He hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded slowly. Jareth Sinclair forged a will and coerced his parents into isolation. I notarized under duress. I'm ready to testify. That night, I uploaded the video to every major outlet captioning it, "You wanted silence. Here's your megaphone." By the next morning, my brother's name was everywhere. Talk shows dissected the case. Commentators debated moral decay in modern families. Strangers I'd never met were defending me online. But Jareth wasn't the kind of man to back down quietly. 2 days later, a courier arrived at my apartment. Inside the envelope was a court summons, defamation lawsuit. I stared at it, almost laughing. He still thought he could intimidate me. The hearing lasted less than an hour. My lawyer presented the videos, the recordings, and Harlan's signed confession. The judge leaned back in his chair, unimpressed. "The court finds sufficient cause to investigate Mr. Jareth Sinclair for elder fraud, coercion, and will manipulation." Jareth's face turned red as he stood there, fists clenched. The cameras outside caught him storming from the courthouse, shouting that it was all a setup. But it didn't matter anymore. The tide had turned. That night, I finally slept, at least for a few hours. Then, Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was the care facility. "Your mother would like to speak with you," the nurse said softly. A video window opened on my screen. Mom's face appeared, pale but smiling faintly. Tears welled in her eyes. "I knew you'd come back for us," she whispered. I swallowed hard. They tried to make me believe I didn't belong. "But you're my mother." That never changed. Her lips trembled. "Your father, he's scared. He didn't understand what Jareth was doing." "I know," I said gently. "And when this is over, you won't have to be afraid anymore." We talked until the nurse came to take her back to bed. For the first time in a long while, her voice sounded lighter, like the woman I'd grown up with before the house became a cage. I closed the laptop, tears drying on my cheeks. For once, the silence in my apartment didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. When I opened my door the next morning, an envelope lay on the floor. Plain white, no return address. My stomach twisted as I picked it up. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice. "This isn't over." The handwriting was unmistakable. Jareth's. I must have read the note 10 times before setting it down on the counter. "This isn't over." His handwriting hadn't changed. Sharp, deliberate, almost elegant in its malice. I folded the paper back along its creases and placed it in the drawer beside my keys. Then I locked the front door twice. Tomorrow was the court date, the last piece of this miserable puzzle. Sleep came late, restless and shallow. Every sound outside made me flinch: the rumble of traffic, a dog barking, the groan of pipes in the walls. When dawn finally came, I stood before the mirror and stared at the woman looking back. The same eyes as my mother's, but harder now. Wiser, maybe. I drove to Phoenix just after sunrise. The courthouse loomed gray and old, its steps already crowded with reporters and people holding signs. "Protect the elderly." "Justice for Lorraine." Cameras flashed as I climbed the stairs, my lawyer, Dana, walking close beside me. Inside, the air was thick with whispers. Jareth sat at the defense table, immaculately dressed, every hair in place. His expression was blank, no anger, no fear, just that same calculating stillness that had always unnerved me. When the judge entered, the room quieted instantly. The proceedings began with testimony from Adult Protective Services, confirming the evidence of confinement and neglect. Then came Harlan, the former estate lawyer, his voice trembling as he recounted the forged signatures and threats he'd endured. Finally, the screen lit up with my mother's face. The video feed flickered, but her eyes were clear. "I didn't sign that will," she said softly. "He told me not to trust my own daughter. He said she'd put us in a home." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I felt my throat tighten. I wanted to speak, to run to her, but I stayed still. This was her moment, her truth. The judge nodded gravely, jotting notes. When it was my turn, I said only one thing. I just wanted them safe. Hours later, when the verdict came, I could barely breathe. Guilty, on all counts of coercion, document forgery, and emotional abuse. The sentence: 1 year of psychiatric supervision, 500 hours of community service, permanent revocation of his inheritance rights. Jareth didn't react at first. He just stared at the judge, then at me, his expression unreadable. When the bailiff approached, he stood and straightened his tie, a faint smile curving his lips. As they led him away, he turned once, his voice low but sharp enough to slice through the silence. "You think this ends here? You have no idea who you've made enemies with." Dana placed a hand on my arm, steadying me. "Don't respond," she whispered. "He's already lost." But as the door closed behind him, I realized I wasn't relieved. Not yet. Justice, as it turned out, wasn't clean, it was heavy. 2 days later, I drove to the care facility to visit Mom. She looked smaller, her hands thin as paper, but her eyes found me immediately. I sat by her bed, and for a long time we didn't speak. Finally, she reached for my hand. "I failed you," she said, her voice trembling. "I believed him when he said you'd abandon us." Tears blurred my vision. "You didn't fail anyone, Mom. You survived. That's what matters now." She squeezed my fingers weakly. "You're the only one who ever truly cared." I kissed her forehead, breathing in the faint scent of lavender lotion. "Rest now. You don't have to carry this anymore." When I left her room, I knew it might be the last time I saw her lucid. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived from the court. Inside was Jareth's written statement. I sat on my couch, staring at his neat handwriting. You've won for now. But family isn't justice, it's war. You just won a battle. I didn't finish reading. I took the letter outside, struck a match, and watched it curl into ash. The smoke rose, twisting against the pale Arizona sky until it was gone. The fallout came fast. News channels replayed footage from the trial. Analysts debated the Sinclair case on talk shows. Dana said I'd become a symbol, someone who fought for those who couldn't fight back. My inbox flooded with messages. Survivors of elder abuse, advocates, strangers thanking me for speaking out. One email stood out, from a nonprofit offering me a role in community outreach. You have the empathy and the backbone we need, it read. I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. For so long, my identity had been tied to survival, to reacting. The idea of moving forward felt foreign. That evening, I drove to the edge of town, where the desert met the old road leading to my parents' house. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in deep orange. I parked near the gate and sat in silence. The house stood there, still and empty. The windows dark. The same wind that used to whistle through the trees carried only dust now. It should have felt like closure. Instead, it felt unfinished. I rolled down the window, letting the air rush in. Somewhere inside, I could still hear echoes of their voices, the laughter that once filled the kitchen, the arguments that tore it apart. This should be the end, I whispered. But it isn't. I turned off the engine and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my shoes. The porch light flickered faintly, as if the house itself remembered me. I took one last look at the place where everything had broken, and where I'd finally learned to stop running. Then I whispered, one more thing to do. The front door creaked open with a weight I hadn't felt in years. The air inside the house greeted me like an old ghost, stale, heavy, filled with dust and memory. A single bulb buzzed overhead, casting dim light onto the hall rug, still bearing the same wine stain from a Christmas long ago. Everything was still. Too still. I held a single cardboard box close to my chest. It didn't carry much, just a few framed photos, my mother's worn rosary beads, and the original will I had once hidden in the basement, the very document that started it all. My fingers trembled slightly as I stepped further in. In the living room, nothing had changed. The old beige sofa still leaned to one side. The coffee table bore faint cup rings, souvenirs from a time when we all still sat together. The family portraits stared back from the walls, frozen moments where we all looked happy. Maybe we had been once. Before the silence, before the blame, before Jareth's betrayal. I placed the box on the table and sat down. I picked up a photo, Mom in the garden, her arms wrapped around a younger me in a red raincoat, smiling as the sky drizzled above us. Another, Dad steadying my bike, his face calm, mine lit with joy. I let my hand rest on them for a moment. The ache came slowly, part grief, part gratitude, part something I still couldn't name. The next morning, I invited a real estate agent to tour the house. He arrived with a clipboard and polite shoes, tiptoeing over my past. As we moved through each room, I didn't tell him about the exact corners where I had cried, or where Jareth had shouted, or where my mother turned her face away when I begged her to stand up for me. But I told him enough. This house, I said, has seen things no home should. I don't want it anymore. But I want it to be something better for someone else. He nodded thoughtfully, adjusting his glasses. You'd be surprised how many homes like this carry heavy stories. But your vision for it, that changes things. Later that week, I signed the papers. The proceeds would go directly into an elder protection legal fund, a small rebellion against the silence I was raised in. As I pressed the pen to paper, I whispered, "You shattered me. But now, you'll help rebuild others." A few days later, I made the trip to the state-run care facility. I hadn't seen my mother in weeks. The scent of disinfectant and withering carnations clung to the halls. Her room was small, sterile but bright, with one window that offered a sliver of trees in the distance. She sat facing that window, back hunched, hair thinner than I remembered. I stepped in quietly. She turned slowly, eyes dull, until they flickered. "Rhiannon," she said, voice thin. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Hi, Mom." Her hand reached out, frail, trembling. She studied my face. "There was a girl," she murmured. She kept fighting. For me. I nodded, tears warming my lashes. She still is. In that moment, her eyes were clear. Just for a breath. And I clung to it. I moved to Tucson soon after, far from the courtroom, the house, the wait. A small apartment with a wide window, the sun pouring in each morning. I found part-time work with a nonprofit that focused on elder abuse and legal advocacy. Every story I heard echoed pieces of my own. People who had been ignored, disbelieved, discarded, they found something in my voice that gave them strength. I adopted a dog, Chance. Brown fur, nervous eyes, and a heart as tired as mine. At night, he curled beside me like a living shield. In his quiet warmth, the silence no longer terrified me. But the peace was fragile. Some nights, I'd wake gasping, sweat soaking my neck, the old dreams dragging me back to the basement, to the courtroom, to the locked doors and the shouting. I'd clutch Chance close and whisper, "It's over. You're safe now." I wasn't always sure if I meant him or myself. One evening, I pulled out my old journalism notebook, the one from college. Inside were pages stained by time, scribbled with hopes, anger, quiet prayers, arguments with Jareth, silent questions to Mom, a note I had once written. "One day I'll speak loud enough to hear myself." I set up my camera that night and recorded a video. To the daughters who were told to lower their voices, to the sons who were made to believe silence was strength, to the women called dramatic, and the men told to man up. This is for you. You were never too much. You were never too small. You deserve to be heard. Tears blurred my vision. But I kept going. That night, I dreamt of the basement. Only it was different. Sunlight filtered through clean glass windows. No mold, no cold, no darkness. Mom and Dad sat on the mattress, smiling. Not the people they became, but the ones I imagined they could have been. My younger self stood beside me at the top of the stairwell. She looked at me wide-eyed. "You're safe now," I whispered. She nodded. I woke to stillness. But this time, it felt like a breath, not a choke. I stepped outside. The desert stars blanketed the sky, quiet and vast. I thought of Jareth, not in hatred, but in clarity. I thought of Mom, of what was lost, of what was left. No, I didn't get revenge. But I got something better. I got truth. I got peace. And finally, I got to keep my voice. The wound remains, but I no longer carry the silence. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come not from strangers, but from the people who were supposed to protect us. This story isn't just about inheritance or betrayal. It's about reclaiming your voice when others try to silence it. Have you ever faced a situation where standing up for what's right meant standing alone? If this story resonated with you, or reminded you of your own family story, share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to